Welcome to Around the Shop with 360 Woodworking. Your hosts are Chuck Bender and Glen Huey. Each Saturday, tune in for the best in woodworking tips, techniques, and general shop fun. Now, here's the 360 guys, Chuck and Glen.
So we're going to begin today with a question that came in from one of our viewers. This one comes from Charles, and he wants to know, when we built furniture for a living, which we technically still do, but not as much.
Right.
Did we make our own banding? And if so, did you publish anything on the construction steps? He says he's trying to make banding, but can't seem to reverse engineer the process and needs a little help. So first of all, Charles, got a mug coming your way, bud. All right.
Forgot about that.
Also, yeah, if you're watching us and you have questions for us, send them in. If we read your question on the air, you get a 360 coffee mug. All right, so when you were doing it, did you make your own banding?
I'd say probably 50-50.
Oh, good, really?
Yeah, I made some, and Dover Inlay was at their height at that point, so it was really easy because they had a ton of different things available, and they were very reasonably priced to contact them and have them make up custom.
I still think I have one of their catalogs, and it came to you in a notebook.
Yep.
I mean, thick notebook of stuff. Fantastic.
Yep.
Hated to see them disappear.
Well, as far as I know, they're back.
Yeah, but it's not the same company.
No,
I mean, they still sell stuff, but not near the way that they did. So
yeah,
it's
no,
totally
it's a
different
smaller
Yeah.
selection.
As far as me making my own, one of the early projects that I did that was one of my first magazine covers was a spice box, and there's a chevron molding or inlay that goes around the outside of the door, and I made that. It's a very simple process. When it came to the other stuff, for the most part, I was buying it because I needed a lot of it. I wasn't taking the time to really knock it out and make it. Reverse engineering it, it's fun to try to figure it out, but when you're trying to knock out furniture for a living, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time fooling around with it.
Yeah, and most of the edge bands that I made were the simpler ones, things that you could throw together pretty quickly.
Yeah.
A
Simple
wide
packs.
crossband and then a couple of strings on either side of it.
Yeah.
And most of that was done for antique restoration. So if you needed more than a foot of it, that was pushing it. So you were trying to match something. So to try and buy it somewhere and have it match exactly was kind of tough. So to me, that's why. And to answer the question about have we published anything on that, I know I haven't.
Well, I have just a little bit out, but we, as a 360 Woodworking, we have and if you're a member, then you have access to this. If you're not a member, what's taking you so long? Though we recently did an article on by Mark Arnold on Greek key, and he actually goes through the step process at the end of the article. It's kind of like the second part of an article, or he explains the process and then goes through it.
Sure.
But the one prior to that would have been Rob Millard. We did a full article from Rob Millard on inlay that he used for his table.
Sure, it's
and
card table.
As a member of 360 Woodworking, you have access to that. If you want to get an idea of it, even if you're not a member, click on the issue, check out our stuff today, because it is a little different from what it was.
And it's that individual article is available in the store.
Oh, there you go.
To purchase as just the article. So if you don't want to subscribe, and why wouldn't you? You can jump in there and grab from Stacks to Strips to Spectacular by Rob Millard.
Yep. Good article. A lot of cool information. Rob runs through a lot of different type of inlays, so that's a good place to start.
But we're not sending Rob a mug. That's all there is to it.
No, Rob doesn't get a mug. All right. Outside of that today, we're going to talk about drawer bottoms. And we talked a little bit about drawers before, a little bit here and there, mentioned dovetails, that kind of stuff. But today, let's get into a little bit more of the history behind drawer bottoms and how they work.
Well, usually they start out with 1/4-inch Luan plywood.
No, that's today. You're absolutely right.
Oh, wait a minute.
No. How were they done in the period? Let's talk that way.
Well, I mean, early on, if you look at the stuff that was going on in the Jacobean and William and Mary period, you get a lot of just square drawer bottoms that were nailed to the bottoms of the sides of the case. And the grain direction tended to run front to back on the drawer.
Right, which is totally in violation of what we know for the most part today.
Right.
And there's good reasons for it. I mean, we talked about it. It pretty much ties in with the same conversation on the backboards that we did.
Right.
With the grain running front to back on a drawer, as it expands and contracts, it expands across the drawer width, which tends to blow apart the drawer.
Right.
So,
but when you think about the structure of it, if you're nailing it at the front and the back, now when you pull on the drawer front, that's adding, especially on those really early pieces. I mean, if you look at some of the Hadley chests and things like that, they've got an 8-inch drawer with one big dovetail. So having a drawer bottom maybe that ran front to back and was nailed helps hold that drawer front on.
Yeah. Plus, you were looking at the drawer sides at that period were not, 1/2 inch thick or 3/8 or whatever. They were tended to be a little thicker because they then had the runners on the sides of the drawers, and those were side hung drawers for the most part. So you have all that to look for. If you got a 3/4 inch or a 1/2 inch or whatever thicker side, then it's easier to nail that too and not have problems.
Yep.
So when we move out of that period, we move into the next phase, which is early
sort of the Queen
Anne stuff.
Right.
Then we start seeing changes.
Sure,
So-
you're going to see that groove that we're all familiar with that goes down the sides and across the front.
Right, on three sides of the drawer.
Right, and the back sits on top. Your drawer bottom slips in, it's beveled, the whole 9 yards.
And when I write, for the most part, and talk about this, I consider that to be typical 18th century drawer construction.
Sure, because it allows for expansion and contraction, unlike the previous method. And except that, those guys did some weird stuff with that too. I mean, they would bevel that drawer bottom and slide it in there, and then they would run glue blocks all down the inside corner there to make sure that the drawer bottom was stuck in place.
It was stayed there. So, weren't actually thinking of wooden. And that wasn't the case all over, because in Rhode Island, you have a little known, somewhat known group
Obscure
of cabinet
guys.
makers. Yeah, called...
Goddard and Townsend.
Yeah, that's it. Goddard and Townsend. Yeah, and those guys did things a little bit differently. They were still applying the drawer bottom. They would cut it and bevel it and apply it, and then they would cut pieces and nail over the bevels and still have everything run on that.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You're gonna follow the practices of two families of hacks from Newport, Rhode Island, who when they were making highboys, still built the bases the William and Mary way, where they built a box, stuck in some glue blocks, and then stuck the legs to the bottom. I mean, granted, they went through, so I'm carving a bon cloth foot, I overcarve a little bit, pierce through the talon instead of carving in the talon. The next thing you know, it's all the rage.
Yeah. So obviously, if you were around during the Revolutionary War period, you wanted to be in Newport, because everything happened in Newport later in the period. So the Revolutionary War didn't get there till the 1790s. And good place to be, during the war.
Kind of like Cincinnati today.
Yeah, well, I wasn't going to go that far, but that's fine. So even those hacks in Newport eventually got in line with the rest of the country.
Of course.
So, okay. So we're into cutting the grooves on 3 of the 4 pieces, and so we're talking about that. But even that, during the Queen Anne period, wasn't the only way they did it, because they still applied the bottoms, and you see it a lot in small drawers, things like that.
Sure.
There's no reason to take an 1.5 inch drawer and pull a
3/4 of an inch out of it, so you can get the bottom in there and have some runner beneath it.
And especially if it's a small drawer. I mean, all the spice boxes, I've done my drawers pretty much that way. On the bottom drawer, I've occasionally run other stuff in there, but so there's a lot of choices. When you move from the Queen Anne into Chippendale periods, we're not looking at a substantially different type of.
If it isn't broke, don't fix it.
Well, that's a good way to look at it too, because not only has it worked from Queen Anne on, but we still do it today, and it's certainly a viable way to get everything done today.
Sure, and it allows, and again, it goes back to, it allows for the expansion contraction of the drawer bottom. When you pull the drawer out, you no longer see the end grain of the drawer bottom or the side grain. You don't see that sandwich of stuff going on. You see nothing but drawer side dovetailed into the drawer front. And that's, I think, more so than anything, they were attempting to hide joinery. So this way you pull it out, all you see is that joinery method between the case, the drawer side and the drawer front. You don't see drawer side, drawer bottom. It was just a visual mess that way.
Right. All right. So if we're talking about cutting that, fitting those pieces, throughout the years, I've developed a system that I use because I know it works and it does all the things that I wanted to do for myself. But the question, I guess, is, how do you make your drawer bottoms? Do you cut them? Do you plane them? Do you use a router bit? I mean, I know there's a lot of people that are making drawer bottoms using the router bits that cut to give you a perfect 1/4 inch, so the 1/4 inch fits into the groove, because you're generally making a groove about a 1/4 inch.
Right.
So what do you do as far as prepping and making your drawer bottoms?
Well, the first thing I do is I take out those nice 20-inch wide poplar boards.
I'm not even going to say it. Go ahead.
I had to get that one in there, folks. You just, he's so jealous of those wide boards for the drawer bottoms.
Jealous.
When I set up, I run my groove. I run a 1/4 inch groove. The top of the groove is 3/4 of an inch from the bottom edge of the drawer side. So that leaves me a 1/2 inch of runner beneath the drawer bottom that's running inside.
Right.
I make my drawer bottoms somewhere between 1/2 and 5/8, depends on the day, so that no matter what, as the drawer side is running on the runners in the case, your drawer bottom isn't dragging.
Right. And that's the whole idea behind it.
Sure. And I think, and as much as I think it was, the change in construction was about the visual aspect, those drawers also ran smoother than the ones where the drawer bottoms were the runner.
Yeah, I totally agree, because you're running with grain. The 2 grains on your drawer runner and on your drawer side are running the same direction.
Right. So, and you're talking about 1/2 an inch or 3/4 at the most. On top of the runner, as opposed to a 36-inch drawer bottom dragging.
Sure.
So it runs smoother. It looks better.
So how do you cut the bevels? Let's go there.
How do I cut the bevels?
Because you and I set up the drawers pretty much the exact same way.
9 times out of 10, I have a raised panel cutter with a ball bearing set up on my shaper, and it's just a question of raising it to the right height and buzzing through it, and that's it.
No kidding. So is it a straight bevel, or is it a bevel that rolls down to fit?
It's a tongued bevel.
Yeah, no kidding. So it's like a raised panel cutter for the most part.
Wow. Well, it is a raised panel cutter.
Yeah, well, but a lot of people, it is. But a lot of people don't associate the raised panel cutter to be used for drawer bottoms.
Right.
Because it's not what it says it is, even though it's got multi-purpose.
And, if the customer traditionally, if my customer has been very period sensitive, if they were, if they seriously collected antiques and they wanted everything to, like where we talked about hardware, and you're getting the hand cast posts and nuts and stuff. For those customers, a lot of times I would bevel them by hand, because, you set up a scrub plane and,
especially with you, because you're cleaning
2-3
your
minutes.
Boards that way.
Yeah, right. I scrub plane the surfaces anyway. So, but the hand plane the bevels doesn't take very long.
All right, so here's what I do. We set up our drawers the same way. I cut my drawer bottoms at the table saw, and I cut the bevel on them. And the way I do it is, I'm 99.9% of the time cutting a 1/4 inch groove, just like you were.
Right.
And I'm using 1/2 inch sides. I'm making that groove about a 1/4 inch deep, half the thickness of my drawer sides. Over the years, I have learned that if you take a raised panel and you start with a blade beveled at 12 degrees,
right,
and you set your fence 3/16 of an inch from the inside edge of that blade to the fence, just as it tips below the top of the table saw,
right,
that you will get a cut that fits perfectly into that groove, and just as it comes out of that 1/4 inch, it makes contact with the drawer bottom, and that's what I aim for.
So that way, when he goes back in and either hand planes or sands off those circular saw marks on the bevels, his drawer bottoms rattle.
They don't rattle. They just have enough at that point to slide in and out without a whole lot of problem. So
you just have to, just like hand planing it from completely, you have to be careful. Otherwise, you're going to end up with them too
definitely, thin. Yeah, because you don't want them to rattle in. But I mean, for the most part, I have cut drawers and raised panels that way for a long time. Difference for me is if I'm cutting a raised panel, as I set it up, I'm going to make that outside or the top edge of that blade flush with my material. That leaves that reveal. Other than that, I'm going to blow all the way through it for my drawer bottom so I don't have it in there. and then it's really easy to clean up anything that happens. So
Sure.
it works fine for me that way. How then are we going to attach the drawer bottom end? Are you just letting it ride in the 3 grooves, or are you using some kind of attachment at the drawer back?
Well, this goes back to the backboard thing where we had all the questions about the nails, because I slide them in and then I'll drive 2 or 3. If it's a really wide drawer, if it's 36, 38 inches, I'll put 3 nails across the back. If it's 18 inches, it'll probably get 2, and occasionally if it's 7 or 8, I'll usually only throw in 1. But
you're not cutting a slot. You're just running
slots.
that right through. See, and this is where you and I differ. I'll cut a slot. And I'll generally put a wide drawer, up to 38 inches or so. I'll put 2 in. I'll usually come in, I try to get them broke down to pretty close to a third. I don't worry about measuring it. I basically use a table saw blade because the 1/8 inch kerf on my blade matches what I'm doing with the nails on those nails and I use the same nails there that I use on my backboards.
Right.
So we're working along the same lines. And I'll go through that, drill a little bit of a hole down there just to give me a guide. Otherwise, those nails are going to move in and out, and you'll have them show up inside your drawer box or outside someplace. So I give them a path to follow.
outside, you just clinch them over and let them go.
Well,
No, it's not.
You get a big grinder and grind them bad boys off.
Well, that's inside.
Yeah. So
No, well, and that's so you're putting the slot in there and you're putting the nail in so that as things shrink, you can push so you're letting the drawer bottom hang out. So am I.
Essentially, the head of the nail is keeping the drawer bottom tight to the back,
Right.
and the slot's allowing that to move front and back without
Are
worrying
you
about
tacking it
bending
at the
nail.
front so that it moves? The movement is confined to the back.
I most times I'll run a little bead of glue in a couple spots across that front bevel and put it in there, and that's strictly to hold it, because I have had it in my own pieces that I have at the house where I have nailed that in and got the nail in there so tight that it held and just pulled the drawer bottom from the front.
Right.
So I tend to run a little glue in there to hold that, and then try to underpower the nail in so it has a little bit of slip to it.
Right. Seeing that, and I let that expansion and contraction happen in the front, even though that's going to be the most visible place, because let's face it, it's going to shrink long term. So it's going to shrink down. Then I just pull the nails out, slide the thing forward, and re-nail it again. So I'm letting my drawer bottom protrude beyond the back of the drawer, maybe 3/8 of an inch.
So yeah, and the way I do that.
No, I don't use them as stops for the drawers.
No, you can't do that, because we just talked about the fact that
It's
they expand and
ever-changing.
contract, it's not going to work. What I do is when I cut my drawer sides, say they're 17 inches, I make my drawer bottoms 17 inches. And because of the extra thickness that's on the drawer front, that 1/2 inch, you're actually pushing that out 3/8 to 1/2 inch. So we're hitting about the same spot.
Yep.
So the question that I've got then is, you go back and pull the nails, slide it forward, and retack them. So how many customers have you visited to do that with?
None.
How about that? So customer at home's working with stuff that's inferior Chuck Bender projects.
Well, at least I'm not one of those Newport hacks.
There you go. Okay, so we've covered an awful lot of drawer backs. I'm sure there's more stuff. Anything else you want to toss in?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head,
Works
so
for me.
we'll see you next week.
Join the 360 guys next week and every Saturday for more woodworking talk from around the shop.